This is Square Enix versus Bethesda, but we're really talking about music and storytelling through RPGs. So we'll be looking at Japanese RPGs and Western RPGs specifically, not just Square Enix and Bethesda, but it's a catchy name. So let's get started. Who are we? Let's go around the table.
All right. I'm Dylan. I'm a third year game design and development student at the Rochester Institute of Technology, and I'm also the woodwind section lead for the Game Symphony Orchestra of the same school. It was my idea for the title. They didn't want the Todd Howard to battle through waves of Square Enix employees, though, so sorry about that. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Ben Donohue. I'm a second-year bioinformatics major at RIT. If anyone's wondering what that is, it's essentially a combination between computer science and biology. I'm also the percussion section lead for the RIT GSO.
So my name's Grace. I'm a third-year physics major at RIT, and I play cello, and I'm also the upcoming president of our GSO.
I'm Caitlin. I like memes. And I'm the treasurer of RTGSO, and I play the viola. I like viola.
Oh, yes. So, before we start, we should be on the same page, and that is, what is an RPG, at least as we've described it? So, an RPG has a few general characteristics. The player assumes the role of a character in the story. There's an overarching plot to follow. There's strategy in combat, at least a little. There's character and ability development throughout the game. And finally, your choices have consequences. I know it's a foreign concept, but choices have consequences. So, to sum it up, an RPG is a game with player-driven character development through their many choices.
Okay, so I'll be touching really lightly about this, but we gotta go back. The story structure is different between both Jrpgs and Western RPGs. Jrpgs tend to use four-part structure, which is Kisho Tenketsu, and the 4 parts are intro, development, twist, and result, while Western RPGs use the Campanian structure, which is from Greek mythology, and it's usually an ordinary world that calls to adventure. But we'll delve into that a lot later.
Okay, so now I want to introduce elements of world building. This will be what our talk will revolve around. We're going to look into world building using video games as our case studies. So the first core element is scope. Now, scope can be split up into 2 sections, breadth and depth. Breadth is the physical boundary of the world. So where does the story take place? How expansive is it? Is it just a city, or is it a continent? Is it a world with many regions, or is it multiple worlds? So how wide does the universe actually go? And depth is the level of detail used to describe each location. So how detailed it is. So the relationship we tend to see is that a large breadth means shallow depth, because you can't, unless you have a lot of time on your hands, develop every aspect of every part of your world. So the second thing is sequence. And this is where in the timeline of the world the story takes place. So from the start of time to the end of time is this story, and how did the past affect the story, and how does the story affect the future? And the last is perspective. So perspective is the point of view of the story, third person, first person, but it's also how the player gains knowledge throughout the game, and that can come in cutscenes or other characters.
So, before we really delve into looking at some specific games, we have a few important questions that we want to address throughout the presentation. We want to know about the balance between breadth and depth of each game, how the past shapes the story, and how the story shapes the future of the world, and how music enhances that, as well as how does the point of view change how we perceive a story.
All right, now let's take a minute to just appreciate how far we've come with RPGs. So let's throw it all the way back to 1976, back when the Earth was young and we didn't have video games, because everyone knows the Earth didn't exist without video games.
You know it.
Yeah. It was created by Will Crowther, a programmer who was just messing around in his office. Oh, it's called Colossal Cave Adventure, excuse me. It was one of the first ever text-based RPGs, so like when you compare it to something like Skyrim or Oblivion or Mass Effect, it really doesn't really live up to it, I guess. But at the time, it was a huge deal, and it's just nice to see how far we've come since these.
So let's delve into JRPGs. So as Caitlin mentioned briefly earlier, there's a specific storytelling technique that most JRPGs follow. The plot relies heavily on exposition and contrast, and this is called Kisho Tenketsu. So it's split up into 4 parts. Ki, you set the scene. So it's your introduction. Shu, you develop the setting, the characters, it's your rising action. Ten is the climax, so that big boss battle at the end, the plot twist that happens. There's an unexpected turn of events. And Ketsu is your conclusion, your resolution. So a lot of JRPGs have a trend of a linear story with very controllable characters. You don't really have say over what the character does or what they look like, how they act. Their story is set in stone from beginning to end. And here's a neat little quote from this review article that I thought really exemplified what I'm talking about. But that's really what the JRPG audience wanted out of its games, after all, to use the role-playing genre to tell an intricate, if linear, story rather than an open-ended game in which you chart your own path. And that's really the big difference between JRPGs and Westerns, which we're going to look at.
So JRPGs have their own special kind of music and art compared to Western RPGs. For the music, it's more it has strong melodies and they're more recognizable. Everyone knows that famous Final Fantasy prelude, and they're usually driven through motifs and harmony. And most of their music is built around the use of like characters, story, and its world. So you have things like character themes and like famous battle themes. For its art, it's very different compared to Western RPGs, where it's more colorful. It has that manga-style anime feel and design in its art. Some examples being like Okami, and the art style is very paint-like and stuff. Even though they do have like realistic sides, like Final Fantasy 13, it still optimizes the use of like bright colors and fun settings. And they also have realistic and pixelized stuff, such as like Earthbound, Chrono Trigger, and Pokemon.
All right, now let's look at some case studies. First, I want to talk about scope, and I'm going to talk about a game series that has a large breadth but a narrow depth, and it's the Pokemon series. So Pokemon in general is a very expansive world. There's a lot of different regions, and there's a lot of games based in all of these different regions, but the characters themselves, the towns, it's all very flat. What you see is what you get. You're playing as a generic character with a generic story. You start at the beginning, get your Pokemon, and you make your way up to become a Pokemon master. And there's not really much of a backstory to them. And I'm going to look at how music plays a role in all of this, using Pokemon Emerald, Ruby, and Sapphire. So scope and music. So because of the lack of character and story themes, there's a lot of location themes. And the first one I want to look at is Little Root Town. So it's the hometown where your family is located, everything's happy, you're young, you're getting your first Pokemon, it's the very beginning of the game, everyone's excited. So this theme reflects that. It's very light and happy, and it reflects your childhood innocence. And let's take a listen. That's too loud? bouncy. It's light. You're no conflict yet. And as you advance from location to location, themes change depending on where you are. And so I want to take a look at the next town, Slateport City. City, not town. So this is a port town, so there's a lot of ships, sailors, whatnot. And so the theme reflects that. It's very adventurous, reflecting kind of a sea jaunty that you're singing, on a boat with your friends. And taking a look in the beginning, there's this bell which kind of represents a ship's horn. It's really fun and catchy. All right. Cool.
Okay, we're going to jump into something that's completely opposite, which is one of the examples of narrow breadth but large depth is Zelda, and more specifically Skyward Sword Zelda. The narrow breadth is that the world is very limited in how many places you can actually go, which is one of the huge complaints about Zelda, Skyward Sword. But with that, they made very detailed worlds, and they later expand in the game depending on the story. One example is Farron Woods. It explains to Lake Floria due to Link needing the verses of the Song of the Hero. Characters are fully fleshed out. An example is Groose. Everyone knows Groose if you played Skyward Sword. He's that bully in the game who's Link's love rival, and Zelda's the one who has to protect him for some reason. But he throughout the game, he grows as a character, and he realizes that he's the one who's destined to help Link. And locations have their own specialized dungeons. That's just built within Zelda, but places such as Linaria Desert having its own pirate ship. We're going to be listening to two examples, being Skyloft and the Linaria Desert. Although the settings are super basic, the music explains the characteristics of the actual place. Skyloft is very pivotal to the story's game and lore, which they explain in the Hyrule Historia. And this is a place where you get items, like at the bazaar, do lots of side quests, getting those friendship crystals, and many story plots are there, point plots. And let's listen to the actual song. Hope you could do it.
I have it.
Okay. Or I can play it.
Oh, no, go back.
I could die.
Close your eyes.
Close your eyes,
You didn't
guys.
see that.
So if you listen throughout the song, the theme's very upbeat and it's very happy. And it has the actual use of accordion and mandolin to bring out that happy feel. And the flute for that very light aired feel. One other example is the Linaria Desert, which is bless you. Completely different in terms of what it looks like compared to Skyloft. It's one of the larger areas of the world, of the 4 parts of the world, and it's just a really big desert, basically. And
You want me to do it?
not yet. And they have specific races for that area, like the ancient robots, as well as later on in the Thunder Dragon. Let's listen to the song. So this song actually explains the characteristics. It has the characteristics of ancient history and how ominous it can feel. See, if you listen to it, it uses panpipes and guitar to have that very dry desert feel to it.
All right. Let's switch gears a little bit to sequencing, and we're going to use Final Fantasy X to look at this. So this game is heavily dependent on the past. A lot of the plot is very much influenced by the religion of the game, which has a lot to do with the origins of Spira, the origins of Sin, and all of that good stuff. And the characters also have very unique backstories, which the music represents and which also drives their actions throughout the game. And so this is expressed through a lot of character and story themes. All right. So let's talk about religion a little bit. So just a little bit of background. Spira is the land that you are playing in, and it is terrorized by this monster called Sin, and which people say is the physical manifestation of the sins of mankind. And so you're obviously trying to defeat Sin and bring peace to Spira. But how the religion plays a role into this is that they say that you need to follow the teachings of their god, Yu Yevon, to get rid of Sin. And so everyone's very religious here. And because of that, there are summoners who, they exist to defeat Sin. And I'm going to play this cutscene right here. This is part of the role of a summoner, is they're very religious. It doesn't play towards the middle. So summoners also, along with defeating Sin, they also send spirits to the far plane, which is kind of like the other world when they die. They put people to rest. And so they have a very important role in the culture of Spira. And this is one of my favorite cutscenes of the game. And you can see Yuna performing sending, because Sin had just attacked this town and killed a bunch of people. And you can hear this theme playing throughout the back. This is called, oh, no, I didn't want to stop it. This is called the Hymn of the Faith, and there's some examples of when it is used, and this is an example of the far plane sending. It's a very emotional scene, and this song, as simple as it is, it holds a lot of power and meaning, especially to the people of the game. I won't play all of it.
Aww.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry.
Go forward. No. All right. So next, I want to look a little bit at character backstories, and I'm going to use Titus as an example. So I'm going to play a song here. I think you all know this. So this is To Xanarkand, and it's kind of, well, it's not Titus's actual theme song, but it's very representative of him, and it's a very good theme song for the game itself, because Titus is a character who was ripped out of his Xanarkand by Sin and thrust into this new world, into Spira, somewhere in the future, and he's basically just, he wants to find his way back home, and so this, oh no, it's called The Xanarkand. It's the main theme. There's a slow piano solo throughout the whole thing. It's used in a lot of other themes too, but it also represents his journeying for home and the truth of him never being able to find his way back, which I'm not going to really say much more about that. And so I'm going to play Titus's actual theme now. So about Titus as a character, he's struggling to live up to his father's legacy. His father, Jack, was a great blitzball champion who was also guardian to Yuna's father in Nebraska, who was a very successful summoner. So, this is Titus's theme. The guitar contributes to the quaint sound that is the melody, and it shows his desire for peace and acceptance by everyone, by his father, and how he just wants everyone to be happy and live in peace. It also plays during a lot of cutscenes that involve Titus and his father, usually when Titus was a little kid and learning blitzball moves, and you can his father kind of treats him like crap. So it is a very mixed feeling there. So a lot of, yeah. We'll move on now.
Okay, so there's another game that uses sequencing called Nier. Nier Automata, I'm going to specifically focus more on Nier Automata, but play Gestalt if you haven't. Nier Automata is considered a direct sequel to Nier Gestalt and Replicant. And so it uses the events from Gestalt as a past story element for Automata. And Automata takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where there's a proxy war between humans and aliens. Humans use androids to fight against the machines that the aliens use. And you play as 3 androids, each with their own perspective. And the game focuses more on specific regions for their own mini storyline with characters to follow. No. It also uses characters from the past entry lore. If you played Nier or Nier Automata, everyone knows that fan favorite character Emile, as well as Devil and Popula, which they all appear in Automata.
Devil and Popula did nothing wrong.
Okay, we're gonna focus more on Emile's theme. I'll do it. Emile is considered a character from the previous game where you first meet him. He states that he doesn't have any of his memories at all. He's wiped clean. His theme follows that specific idea and is super happy-go-lucky and cheerful, and even has a built-in ad in the lyrics. It even matches the personality that he has while he has no memories.
It's too high. I'll pump it up.
So it starts off first with a very fanfare, heavy brass kind of feel that's like victory sounding. And him screaming in the, in the song. Okay, everyone loves it, by the way. Okay. Okay. or that. Okay.
We know you love it so much, we're playing it again.
Yes. But when you play throughout his hidden side quests, he slowly recovers these lost memories. And when he fully remembers everything, that what his friends have gone through, and that he's actually all alone in this world, he's really sad and he actually despairs. You can hear that very intense, dramatic flair to the theme instead of that really silly, lyric kind of sound to it. This is actually right from Gestalt, and the lyrics are very sad and lonely. And the first Emile's theme was actually a happier version of just this one, this theme. No. Okay. In terms of perspective in JRPGs, one huge example is Persona 5, where how do you learn this information? You play as Joker. Everyone knows Joker, especially in Smash.
Oops.
Oops, my bad. It's a third-person RPG, and he is a silent protagonist, very popular within the Persona series. And you travel around Tokyo, as well as through dungeons called palaces, which reflects a person's corrupted heart. One example of this is the first boss in the game, named Kamoshida, who's a high school gym teacher who abuses his students to get what he wants. And his heart kind of reflects that, being how he's a king in a kingdom, which is a school, and his servants are students within that school. And this perspective is special within Persona 5, because how you take in this information is you're actually within an interrogation room, and many of the games played within a flashback, and then you go back to the interrogation room. We're going to be looking at a song that's a staple song found within all Persona games since Persona 3, called Aria of the Soul.
It was in Persona 1.
Oops, very sorry.
Yeah, Persona 1 too.
Play it?
Yeah, play it. The song plays within the Velvet Room, which is how Joker just randomly thrown into this room, and he ends up meeting 3 pivotal characters in the game: Justine, Caroline, and Igor. And it says Igor tells him how the Velvet Room is a reflection of Joker's heart, which is a prison, which he considers a prison, and how this is considered an important perspective in this story. And it makes him feel like that he's trapped and he cannot go free within the actual reality he's in. And that this room is a place of rehabilitation to put him back into society. And the whole game story is based off of his determined to change that. And you can hear that within the arrangement, strings piano and a strong soprano voice, and it represents the place where Joker goes between consciousness and unconsciousness. We're going to be talking about another song within Persona, but it's a spoiler warning, so if you haven't finished the game, I'd say plug your ears and close your eyes. Unless you've finished it.
You have 10 seconds to finish the game.
Get your PS4s and finish it.
Right here.
So this song's called Outer Beginning, which plays at the true final boss of the game. And it plays at a pivotal part of the game. During the actual fight, Joker's team starts to lose power since the people of Japan lose belief in his actual Phantom Thief group, and it makes him disappear from existence. But then all the people... no, not yet. But then all the people, you and the player, Joker, have bonded throughout the game, which are confidence and stuff, continue to give that hope to them, which snowballs throughout Japan and the world, and shout out their name while they see them fight against this god. And now they come back even stronger to defeat this so-called god, basically just shooting the god in the face. You play it.
As you do, you know?
As you do. You can hear that fanfare of the horns coming in very strong. That makes it feel like a finale. Climax to the game.
All right, this will be the last JRPG we talk about. Best for last, right? We're going to talk about perspective in Kingdom Hearts, the series as a whole. So, the gameplay is a third-person limited point of view. You are playing as Sora in his point of view, no bird's-eye perspective on anything. And so, but who is actually telling the story? It's some omniscient third person. You're not seeing a lot of cutscenes from Sora's point of view. You're seeing a lot of cutscenes about other characters elsewhere in the world. And so, the player is clued in generally before Sora is about a lot of things, but that's also not very hard with the kind of character Sora is. Yeah. Another unique aspect of perspective is that not just the cutscenes, but the games are also from other perspectives. A lot of the games are from different characters themselves, like Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days, you play as Roxas in Organization 13. Nothing to do with, well, it has a lot to do with Sora, but he's nowhere in the game. Birth by Sleep is your Ben, Aqua, and Terra through Keyblade Wielders 10 years before Kingdom Hearts happens. But these games clue you into a lot of important knowledge for Kingdom Hearts 3, which is coming out next. Not this month, it's coming out this month. Yes. Hopefully. All right, so let's talk about some of this music. I think you all know this song. Dearly Beloved. It's considered the theme of the whole series. It plays in a lot of different songs throughout the story, such as Always in My Mind. I don't know if you know these off the top of your head. These are some examples. It also plays the beginning and the end of each game. So you get a different version. You get a different version each game you play, and it kind of brings you full circle, but also hints at the tone of the game as a whole. This is just, you hear this and you immediately think Kingdom Hearts. So this kind of ties a lot of themes together throughout all of the games. Next. All right, let's look into some songs in particular. I'll play this. This is called Missing You. It's solo piano with a very soulful melody. It brings a lot of memories of nostalgia and yearning, and that's usually what it's used in these kind of cutscenes. So So it plays a lot in 358 over 2 days, involving Axel, Roxas, and Shion, who are it's the trio you know in that game. They have a lot of losses and issues to deal with on their own. Axel, the idea of being a nobody, trying to figure out if he should stick with his friends or follow the wishes of Organization 13. Roxas with his lost identity, lost memories. Shion struggling with the knowledge of her purpose in life. It's very melancholy and sad, and everyone wants a better future for themselves. And then there's also, it plays in Kingdom Hearts 2 with a lot of scenes about Kairi, and especially when she's thinking about Sora, and because they're separated a lot. So there's a lot of yearning and missing you there, if she likes it. All right. The next one I want to talk about very briefly is Roxas's theme. It has a very similar feeling to Missing You, but flute has the main melody here, and it's a lot more somber of a tone than Missing You. It's very sad. It makes you feel like things are coming to a close, which they are. So this is played a lot during the beginning of Kingdom Hearts 2 when you're playing as Roxas, as you're drawing close to Roxas' end, as he needs to join with Sora to wake him back up. So here's some cutscenes where they play in. This is also played, a version of this is played in the Final Mix version of Kingdom Hearts 2 at the end. You encounter Roxas and you guys fight, and they're both kind of struggling to understand the other's existence. Roxas with his jealousy of Sora, and Sora with his confusion of Roxas.
Oh boy, time for the Western RPGs.
There you go.
Buckle up. So, to start off, I want to talk about the Western RPGs and their storytelling. Mostly, I've found that thematically, they have vastly different themes from like each game, but they all have a tendency to be very personal themes. I'll talk about why a little later, and then how an RPG made in the West tackles storytelling has its roots in ancient Greek theater. Yeah, the Greeks are back. So, they all revolve around a single conflict. The game starts pretty much when the conflict shows up, and the game doesn't end until you figure out that conflict and solve it. They typically have the cause and effect structure that theater follows even to this day.
All right, now, in terms of music and art, Western RPGs, they tend to focus on making it as realistic as possible and try and get you into the moment as much as they can. In terms of animation, everything looks super real, and there's a huge emphasis on detail, such as 4K water effects that have become so evolved that Finding Nemo starts playing in your room. If any game devs are out there, make that happen. Yeah, in terms of the music, it's a lot more cinematic. Usually there's a general use of a full orchestra, but there's also, it's generally there just to serve as a backdrop to whatever event you're in the game. So an example, let's take a look at Streets of Whiterun. Or we'll go to the next slide.
Wait, tech school.
I know how to work computers.
Can we turn that up? So as you can already tell, there's not a lot going on with this music, but if you look at the town of Whiterun, it's a very peaceful town. So of course, like, there's very little melody, but there's nothing that's really off-putting to this. It's there to serve as a backdrop to the sounds of like merchants calling out to make sales, people saying hi to you. It's just there just to emphasize the sense of peace. Unless the Dovahkiin suddenly decides to quick save in front of an Imperial Guard and draw his longsword. Moving on, another section is character themes, such as the player's theme, which is Dragonborn. Yeah. Already you can tell there's a use of chanting to remind the player that they have been given this God-given gift to be able to wield the power of dragons and prove destroyed all your enemies are big. There's a lot of power here, and it's just to remind the player, like, you are the Dragon Lord. You are powerful. You can save the world.
You know, I used to be a con goer like you, and then I took a panel to the knee. So, the breadth and depth in Western RPGs, typically they have a large area, very wide breadth. You go to a lot of places. Look at this map of Skyrim. It's pretty not labeled. But that's beside the point. It's a map of an entire province, and you can explore the entire province on foot. But to trade off, the depth of each location isn't very deep. You certainly aren't going to have as much detail and lore as one of the 4 locations in Skyward Sword. But, you know, it's still good because you can explore a lot of places instead. Bioshock Infinite has you going through an entire flying city. It's a big city. And what ties all of these locations together is that they all have background music tracks, typically speaking anyways, and that music, it's there to set a tone. It's a backdrop. Mass Effect uses full orchestration with synthesizers because it's the future. There's technology, and the synthesizers are really a good way to show that in the music. So past and present, the sequencing, almost all RPGs, at least the ones we looked at, like theater, past events set up the primary conflict in the story. Bring us the debt, bring us the girl, pay off the debt. That's Bioshock Infinite, and you keep hearing that over and over, and that's the whole point. You're in a flying city. The world, when you finish a game, it's a direct result of what you did during the game and how the final conflict was resolved, and music played at pivotal moments is used to reinforce the mood and the feeling that you should be getting at each major plot point. Lastly, here we have point of view. Point of view is almost entirely first person, and because of that, you have your themes, and they're very personal, and that's because everything that happens to the player character is like it's happening to you, at least in any game with good immersion. Anything that happens to them is like happening to you. I say ow every time I get shot, which is to say, in Borderlands 2, many times. Some example themes of games that I was looking at, Fallout 4. How far will you go for the greater good? You get to make the choice at the end of the game. Bioshock Infinite. Your choices have life-altering consequences. You kind of aren't making the choices that alter Booker DeWitt's life, but you watch it all go down in first person. When you are dunked into the river, your camera goes underwater and you can see bubbles rising to the surface. Borderlands 2, your real family's chosen by you, not your blood. we're not here to talk about game plots, but Angel doesn't really consider her biological dad, her actual dad. The game is 4 humans playing together, and they're all vastly different, but they're a team. They work together, and they're pulled together by the game's events.
Now, going back to the idea of how Western RPGs are a lot more personal, they go as far as having characters that are there just for your character. So throughout the Mass Effect series, you can find several companions, each with their own stories and personalities and side quests, but in the end, they all become part of your squad. So let's take a look at Morton Salas here. Now, he's this kind of techie science geek doctor, and he also works for the greater good in the sense that he does what he thinks is the most right, whether it be healing the good or killing the bad. which is unlike the rest of his race, which usually tends to lean towards the side of working towards saving the good. Now, if we listen to his theme here. Like, already you can tell it's kind of got a mysterious vibe. It's really synth-heavy, which is reminiscent of the whole theme of the cyber-esque Mass Effect series. Now, if we skip ahead a little bit, you'll agree with me. So already there's a huge sense of power to remind you that Morton, yeah, he's Kentucky Giant 8, but he's a member of your squad that's going to wipe out the entire collector, the evil aliens, and save the galaxy. There we go. Now, it's the same thing with another character named Tali Zora Naraya. Hopefully I pronounced that right. She's this quarry mechanical genius, also kind of on the similar side of Morden with this nerdy kind of vibe. And she's responsible for this important research mission, which also ties in. She does her nerdy side, or stop. And if we listen to her theme, so it kind of has this underground vibe. So you could imagine her just working on some machinery downstairs, like working on the ship's engine. But if we go further ahead, so now it's got this sense of drive, and it's there to eventually build up into this. So it eventually builds up more and more power, just there to remind you, yeah, she's a nerd, but he's here to help you save the day. And it just goes to show that regardless of each character's motives and story, they are there for your character to help you complete your mission to save the world.
So we have Fallout. The music in Fallout is a little different, and that's because it's almost entirely ambient music. There's not a lot of memorable original pieces from the series. You know, it sets the mood, and it's very good at that. It works a lot like how music works in theater or cinema today. But while they aren't very memorable on their own, and to prove that, I could not tell you the name of pretty much any track in Fallout if I just heard the music. But what I can tell you is what I was doing the last time I heard it. Because ambient music really highlights what players are doing. It highlights our stories as players. Like, one time I had to sneak through a raider camp with 2 landmines and an empty Nuka-Cola bottle because I ran out of bullets. That was an adventure. Yeah.
Which one?
Pick the first one. So, like, this is intense music that's playing while you're in combat, and I hear it a lot when I'm slinking behind a rock trying not to get seen again, and they're shooting at one of the many rocks because they think I'm behind it. Can we switch to another piece? This is just the ambient exploration music that plays when you're on like the coast on the eastern part of the map, and you're just walking around hoping there's not a deathclaw around the next corner. That's a little spooky, but you know, it's very mysterious and very tense because you don't know what's out there. It's an unfamiliar land. Yes. Moving on to something a little different. Bioshock Infinite, it revolves around the idea of cycles and consequences. They got a little creative with their sequencing. Choices from your past shape the future. Booker DeWitt shows up twice in any given timeline. He just hasn't realized it yet. The music typically is reflective of the 1912 setting of the game.
Which one? This one?
First one, right?
This one?
The one on.
Barbershop?
Yeah. No, not Barbershop.
Okay.
This is one of the songs that you're just getting a glimpse of what life in Colombia is like for the average citizen. Like, one time you land on the beach, and you just see a bunch of people enjoying a day off. It's a flying beach, but whatever. And, it's just very happy and light. But if you switch to another piece that stands out, the Barbershop Quartet, that is a Beach Boys song called God Only Knows. Now, barbershop quartets aren't out of place in 1912, anyways. But a small detail is that this song was written in 1966, over 40 years after the game takes place. And while it seems like an insignificant detail or maybe an oversight from the developers, it really drives home the point that in Bioshock Infinite, time doesn't exactly flow linearly. Things from the future end up in the past and vice versa, like this song from 1966 being sung by a barbershop quartet in 1912.
Now, we talk about how Western RPGs, they tend to err more to the side of realism, and they can go as far as having their own societies. So if we take a look at Dragon Age, you can play as several different races, whether it be a dwarf, an elf, a human, and each of them has their own level in society, which you can see through their own personal themes. So, for example, if we take a look at dwarves, let's listen to their theme first. Turn it up. It's not as quiet as expecting. There we go. So it sounds a bit dark, and every so often you can hear the sound of an anvil, which kind of goes to show, tells the player that these guys, they live in the shadows of their own ruined kingdom, and they are responsible for constructing the deep roads, which is the main mode of transportation for them. Now, if we take a look at what they look like in the image, these guys, they don't look exactly friendly, in a sense that they're hardened by their own hard work. If we take a look over at something like humans, now these guys, they are more upper class. They're like, not quite the, I think it's bourgeois? What is it? Bourgeoisie, if any of you know that term. They're much more higher class, and they're regarded with a lot more respect. So if we take a look into their theme. So it's a lot more melodic, and it's almost got a more like heroic vibe to them. To remind the player, like, this is the highest point of society. For the purpose of time, we're just going to skip ahead.
All right.
Okay.
So, time to summarize. What is the difference between JRPGs and Western RPGs? So, looking at some facts about JRPGs that we've looked at, the animation style is a lot more colorful, it's more rounded. The music is definitely more melodic and leans on a lot of variations to develop emotions and narratives. It helps tell a story more like on its own besides the characters. And a lot of the perspectives are generally variations of third-person point of view. You don't see many JRPGs that are first-person point of view.
All right, moving to Western RPGs, they tend towards hyper-realistic animation styles. I told my roommates not to play Skyrim before we went to bed. They didn't listen to me. They did, and I spent 4 hours this morning trying to find one dry pair of socks. Ambient music is way more prevalent in Western RPGs. They are open-ended, and they serve as a backdrop to any given scene, and it's very open to interpretation. And perspective is almost always first person. Some will let you switch to third person, but they almost always default to first person.
In terms of story and gameplay, the JRPGs are typically more linear and very restricted in what they do. It still uses that Kisho Tenketsu form. People want that linear story when they play a JRPG. And characters generally are, their characteristics are generally set in stone, and they're established to have an appearance and story upon the start of the game. And because of this, it has that not like customization kind of thing, and they have their own goals and personalities already set.
Now, if we take a look back at Western RPGs,
Oh, no.
or we're just going to go to the end of the presentation. That's all, folks. Now, games, they are not story-driven at all. They're there to make the player have as much free will as they want. You can create your own character, you can romance whatever character you want, whether it be your child love interest or childhood love interest, excuse me.
No, not your child.
One word difference.
Your child.
Look, man, we're hungry.
Yeah, that game is called FBI Simulator.
I'll call the police.
Yeah, character creation is a lot more common. You can be whoever you want and do whatever you do. Whether you want to follow the story and you want to be the hero of Cyrodiil that sealed all the Oblivion Gates, or you want to be the village idiot that spent 30 minutes trying to get a bucket on top of a shopkeeper's head so you can steal all his sweet rolls.
Clearly, the second is better.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's it. Thank you all for coming and listening to us talk for an hour. We'd also like to thank both MAGFest and Mages for giving us this opportunity. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Our emails are on the slides, and we have a few minutes for questions. So, any questions? Yeah?
Where do you guys think a game like the Witcher series falls on the spectrum between Western and Jrpgs that has more of an established character and story, but still has a breadth of world?
I've only played like about 50 hours of The Witcher 3, so based off a little bit, just a little. I think it touches more like more in the middle of what I've played so far, which is up to the point of having sex with someone and then killing them accident. Whoops, my bad. But
just casually.
Yeah, but it does have that like heavy character-driven, like characters have their own goals and personalities, but it still has that very open, arid feel to it, and I think that's why I think it has more of the middle of it than anything else. Although I do like Geralt, he's hot.
Yes, in the middle.
What would you say is the difference between Kisho Tenketsu, was it?
Yeah.
And Jrpgs, which is, from my understanding, is almost the same, just 3 steps with beginning, great graphic.
So I think I was reading about this a little bit, but I didn't spend a lot of time looking at the 3-part thing. But from what I read, I'm pretty sure it said that like they're used for different kinds of storytelling in Japan. Like this is more used for like games and actual stories, whereas I don't remember the name of the 3-part one. Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to say that. Yeah. If I had my laptop, I'd be able to pull this up, but they're used a lot more for like art and music and things like that, poetry, like different kinds of storytelling. So this is more like, not a lot of games will follow that 3-part structure, which is why we didn't really talk about it.
Is there any more questions?
If you want to just talk. Yeah, we'll
like
be here.
Yeah, we'll be
we
here
have,
just for
I think,
personal questions.
Yeah.
6 more minutes, so
Yeah,
ask us
Sit
anything.
there until someone says something.
Well, I used to go to RIT. Do they still call information technology? I tried.
Yes.
Definitely.
I'm in computer science, so I can attest to that.
Rich. Yeah.
Do you think Western developers are a little scared of taking power away from the players? Because they usually tend to, like you said, use Ambient for most of their stuff and not as much memorable tunes because they want to keep the player in the main focus. Do you think that they're a little scared of making more memorable tracks because they think that'll take away from the player?
Well, I think definitely the AAA developers are, because they not only have to sell like the developers and like the rest of the studio on the idea, but they have to convince the investors that it's a good idea. So like that's why that's why I think AAA companies would rather stick with something they know works, because it's easy to convince investors of that. But I think the market is pretty free for indie developers to just have a good idea and it's like, hey, let's take influence from a Japanese RPG. Let's make some really good music and build off of that.
If you don't want me saying, of course, that indie game that just came out on Switch, like the whole opening sequence that's just music pretty much, and the entire game is just all music. I don't think I've seen a last AAA game that just started out completely entirely music with no narration.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Did you take a look at any of the classic music that was in Fallout, like the old music that you hear on the radio?
Oh yeah, yeah. So like the classical music channel. Yeah, God, that's my favorite to turn on when I'm getting shot at by everyone. That's actually the music I had playing in the basement of this one hospital, where it was basically a Deathclaw battle arena. It was prisoners in a cage versus a Deathclaw. I didn't have the cage, but I still had a Deathclaw. It's definitely different when you change it up from the ambient music to the radio stations. I still think it serves a similar purpose, but it gives a player a lot more control over like what they want going on to set the tone for whatever they're doing. It can be really funny if you do the classical channel. Yeah.
Okay. So as opposed to the classical radio for Fallout, what about the like the Appalachia radios, like 1950s music? Would you compare that to the slide you had about Bioshock?
Do you want to go back to it?
Go
back. We'll go back. Where's
Go
that
back?
slide?
Yeah. I think it's similar.
This one's
but
no. Wait.
Yeah.
Where is it? This one.
The-
Okay.
The thing with like the 1950s radio is that instead of being a piece from the future being pulled into the past, it's a piece from the past that survived to the future. And it is very similar, but instead of being a hold up, that shouldn't exist, it's a hey, that's still around. It's a similar but different feeling. Yes.
How do you think the Mario RPGs sort of contributed to the RPG scene as a whole? Because one of the first really influential things that the Super Mario RPG game did, as well as Mario and things like that, they created time hits where they're after gameplay. How do you think that contributed to the whole scene as a whole?
Well, I would like to think that it serves as kind of like an oddball to the rest of the RPG series, because most of the time, like if you take a look at a JRPG, it's kind of turn-based, which,
Always.
well, not always, but
Always.
yeah, something like Final Fantasy is turn-based. Or to look at the completely opposite end, you have Skyrim, which is completely action. Now, Paper Mario, that's more of like, it's action and turn-based, so it's a lot. I guess you could say it's in the middle, and it kind of gave developers ideas for both ends of the spectrum. You guys have anything else to say on that?
No.
It's on a flash drive. I just haven't played it yet. Yeah.
Any other questions?
If you guys just want to talk too.
Yeah.
So we have 1 more minute.
We know a lot about RIT.
Yeah. I can call. I'll just